Good evening, good evening. Come on in. I'm so excited to bring you another edition of the Daily Debrief. Who am I? My name is Jade Simmons, and I am your one and only, truly, really and truly independent candidate for President of the United States. Yes, that's right. I'm running in this year's election, the 2020 presidential election. If you want to find out more about my candidacy, you're going to go to Operation Restoration 2020. And you're going to find out more.com. Deshaun, I'm glad you're here. I was literally thinking about you today. I hope you've been taking a bit of time to watch some of these debriefs for yourself. All right, so tonight's a special edition. I am going to do what I have been doing, which is run down some of the news and my take on what's going on. More important than an opinion, because you don't need another one of those. More important than my opinion is for you to understand my vision for the nation. More importantly than that is for you to understand how I see you in this nation. Because I think you want to start now to look for leaders whose character you can trust in the toughest of times. Don't waste your energy being frustrated by how current leaders lead, because they showed you how they lived, and that was going to determine how they lead. We cannot lead any differently than how we live. So I dare you to check my track record as well. I want you to see how I've been interacting in the world thus far. That's going to give you a clue to what type of leadership I would provide. If anybody has been wondering along with you, who is this person and what is she doing? Why is she jumping in the race when everyone else is jumping out? Share this with them. You're also going to follow us on the Operation Restoration 2020 Facebook page. That's where a lot of new information is coming out starting tomorrow. We are so excited about what April holds. This is going to be a time for us to really begin to overload you with content so you can begin to hear my heart, but also that you can really begin to read over my policy and my platforms as well. This is a time here for us to get to know each other. I always want to hear exactly what you're thinking. I want to know what issues are resonating with you. What is it that you're wanting from your next leader? I want to start, as I always do, with good news. I'm going to end today with a special performance for you. Many of you know that my training, my education was in music. I'm a classically trained concert pianist. I make my career today by combining my artistry with my ability to communicate powerfully. So I combine those two things to create what we call transformational main stage experiences that move people beyond way more than they were expecting. You're going to hear me say the word purpose a lot of times. You're going to hear me say transformation a lot of times. I believe that our nation needs to be reminded of its God-given purpose, which is to be under God, indivisible. And I think the only way we get there is to first say no to the rampant division that we're seeing in our nation. Good news, as promised. You're going to see enough bad news in the headline. You heard some awful news today about our projected number of deaths. Believe it or not, those numbers are conservative, and they are actually still way better than what they could be. So because I know over the next 2 weeks especially, we're going to hear a lot of tough news, I want to start with good news. Here's what I've been noticing, as many of you have been hitting me up on social media and as I've been experiencing in my own life. By the way, share this if you know people who want to hear good news right now. We are seeing a return to our first loves as people. I don't know about you, let me know in the comments if you were shocked by how hard we took the fact that we had to stay home and only operate on our devices. I kind of feel like all we've been doing for the last 10 years is operating on our devices. I was shocked that we were suddenly restless, suddenly wanted to connect with real live people, suddenly wanted to put our devices down and go back to being in person. So much so that we are literally risking life and limb to get back to being in the same, same room with each other. Here is the beauty in that. It is reminding us that as people, the first thing we're designed to do is to connect with each other. We're not supposed to be hiding behind these devices. This was always supposed to be plan B. This was always supposed to be our secondary form of communication. Shame on us for making devices and digital connection our primary connection. This has caused us to remember what is most powerful, which is real life connection. I pray with me that when this thing is over, and it will be, We will go back to making real connecting our first choice. Digital will be the icing on the cake. It's an additional way to connect and not to disconnect. Number 2, how many of you are reconnecting with your families more powerfully? So much of the policy that's going to be needed in the next administration will focus on family. I think family is going to now take a more predominant place than it ever did in our society. People remembered how much they love their families. Some of you got to know your kids all over again. Some of you got to remember who you married in the first place. Hopefully that's for better and not for worse. We've been having powerful reconnection in my own home. I found out that my son, who is a self-taught pianist and self-taught guitar player, also knows how to play by ear. I'm a professionally trained musician. I don't have the gift of playing by ear. I discovered why. Why? Because we're home together. We were worshiping together in our front room, watching our church service online, and my son played along to every single worship song without music, without knowing what the key was. I would have never known that about my son had I not had this special time together. I dare you to look for opportunities to reconnect powerfully with your family, to get to relearn who they are. And I dare you to take those discoveries with you on the other side of this. I've been hearing a lot of churches. I'm an open Christian. What I mean by that is I'm not ashamed to say that. I do feel like my faith has been hijacked, in particular over the last few years, by one party that is claiming to own what it means to be Christian or to have faith. I refuse to allow that to happen. I do speak boldly about my faith because I think that there needs to be counterexamples to some of the examples we have seen. I say that to say, even as I practice my faith willingly at home every day, no matter what, I have been hearing other pastors and church leaders lament the fact that, of course, we're not able to gather in person. And one of the reasons they're saying is that if we're not careful, that this COVID really was meant to take away the power of gathering. That if we're not careful, if we don't keep paying attention, that this was going to be a trick of the enemy. It's a phrase you will heard very much in Christian circles, that this was a way of taking away our right to gather. That could be very well and true, but here's where we will miss something big. I see what's happening to us now as a major reset button. And I think that if we're being honest, the same way we forgot the power of connecting in real time, many churches have forgotten the power of worshiping with abandon. I tell you what, when we go back to church, music's going to sound better. The worship experience is going to be better. The preaching is going to be better because we were reminded that it's not about the church building. It's not about the personality on the stage. It's not about the ministry being built. It's about the opportunity to get together to worship God. So I think that even churches are going to see a rebirth after this if they take the reset seriously. I dare you to take this reset seriously. Let's jump into. I'm going to end the night performing for you. My first love is music. All of my initial education is in the world of music. I'm going to play for you because I think in situations like this and times like this, we do need to be reminded of the beauty that still exists around us. So I'm honored to do that for you at the end of this broadcast. So this will be a slightly shorter issues broadcast. Here's what I want you to know. Coming up at the end of the month, the last week of April, I believe it's the 20th, 22nd, and 24th, we are doing a virtual listening tour. I'm going to bring you big ideas that I have on policy related to education one night, healthcare the other night, and then it'll be the economy. Maybe not in that order, so don't hold me to that. But here's why they're called a listening tour. We're not bringing you town halls. A town hall is where I talk at you, maybe you ask a few questions, and I stick to my messaging and my bullet points, and I tell you only what I want you to hear or what I think you want to know. What a listening tour is actually listen to the issues that matter to you. I want to hear your viewpoints. And then before I release policy in its written form, I want to make sure that you hear some of what you said coming back at you. I think it is time now that our politicians stop running for us. We're not babies. We have ideas, we have beliefs, and they start running with us. I'm running for president of the United States with you. In order to do that, I have to hear what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and what's really important to you. A lot of Other campaigns, what they'll do is they'll get a think tank together, they'll take a poll, and they'll find out what they think you want to hear. Anybody on here ever got polled? Nobody ever called me. Anybody ever called you? Nobody ever called me. I didn't take a survey. And then they tell me what they think I need as a Black female, or as a Christian, or as a Republican, or as a Democrat. And I'm sitting here going, I don't hear actually my viewpoints, my philosophies, my theories, my hopes, my dreams, my desires at all echoed in the platforms and policy. Operation Restoration, learn more about us at operationrestoration2020.com. We are determined to make sure that we're running with the people on the issues that they care about the most. So you're going to follow us, because at the end of the month, we're doing a listening tour where we're going to let you know about these things. We're also going to hear from you before we release our official policies to the public. If you want to be involved to the point where you may even be having a role in what I know about the issues, you're going to text RESTORE to 33777. You're also going to do that if you simply want to find out more about the campaign, if you simply want to know when things are happening. Whether or not COVID lifts as quickly as we like, we're going to be bringing you more powerful ways to gather and more powerful ways to join with us in restoring the nation. So make sure you're signed up there, RESTORE at 33777. You're also going to text that. If you're interested in being a part of the volunteer effort, you're going to click on the Get Involved button once you get to the website as well. And you're going to join us on Monday, April 6th. That's our volunteer kickoff virtual meeting. We're so excited to activate you. Thank you, all of you who have been hitting us up and saying, how can we get involved? We've got answers for you. Okay. I am seeing some wonderful faces on the line tonight. Hello, DGC ladies. It's very exciting to see people who already know my heart, because I know that they will hear some consistency in what I'm saying. In your next leader, you want to look for consistency. You want to look for consistency in how they live so that you can predict how they're going to lead. Here's what we're discovering this week. Hold on to your britches for this one. Money suddenly became the great equalizer. Because of the COVID crisis, money is suddenly the great equalizer. Why do I say that? Well, normally we think money is the thing that definitely shows us all the inequalities that we have. Suddenly this last week, we all became socialists. Did you notice that? Did you notice that? As we were watching the debates, I think Bernie Sanders really has been getting raked over the coals for that word socialist. He claims to be a democratic socialist. I do not. But I think it's funny that suddenly we did not have a problem with the government helping us out. Suddenly everybody needed the same thing. Everybody needed money, whether you were almost on the street practically anyway at your socioeconomic status level, whether you were one of the richest people around, you suddenly needed money because your companies needed money. Suddenly money was the great equalizer. Here's the good thing about that. When we're all suffering to some degree, different levels, right? You got third world problems, you got first world problems. When you're all suffering to some degree, suddenly you can come together and work together. So what happened was, because money became the great equalizer, you saw two sides of Congress suddenly be able to pass a bill in a week. Makes you wonder, how come certain bills were being sat on? How come certain things were taking months and years to pass? I've been saying this, and I will say it until you listen. The division that we see in our politics and in our nation, it is intentional. It is also very profitable for the people in charge. Even when you saw us needing to come together on this bill, you saw delays on both sides because either side would grandstand. I don't care how many days, even if we got this done in the fastest we've ever gotten it done, a week's time. Imagine how many more lives are lost each day there is a stalemate. Each day there is a stalemate. It cost us, not just during COVID-19. Every day there is a stalemate. People die unnecessarily. Whether it's regarding access to health care, whether it's regarding being homeless and on the street, no matter what, whenever there are stalemates, people die. We need leadership now that agrees that stalemates are no longer acceptable, especially if the stalemates are emanating from the fact that two sides are fighting against each other instead of fighting for us. Last week, money became the great equalizer. It was President Lincoln who said the government is supposed to do for the American people what they cannot do for themselves. That was Lincoln. That wasn't me. That wasn't a socialist. That was Lincoln. The government is supposed to do what people cannot do for themselves. There are different degrees to that. And I think what this crisis has shown us is that there are inequities in the economy, inequities in healthcare. Chisholm is here. She knows, she will tell you that for sure. And the way we talk about the economy now has to change. The way that we talk about the economy right now is only in terms of two things. Anybody know what it is? Put it in the comments. We talk about the economy in two ways. That has to change. We have to begin to talk about the economy in an entirely different conversation. The two ways that we currently talk about the economy is in the stock market and in the GDP, the gross domestic product. Those two things affect a sliver of the American population. I want you to just do a check on your own and find out how many of your friends own stock. Find out how many of your friends own stocks. Find out how many of your friends even know what the GDP is. But for years, we've always judged our economy on something that only affects a sliver of the population. That's why we've been able, the current administration has been able to tout having a good economy. The truth is, what the economy really should tell us is how the everyday American is faring. It should be an indicator of the financial health of the majority of citizens. When we say the economy is good, that should mean that everybody has what they need to do what is required to live lives that are healthy, that are safe, and to be able to live in dignity. When you have people who don't have running water in their homes, you cannot be saying we're the wealthiest nation on earth and that the economy is good. When you say that we have low employment, that can't be because people are actually working 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. That is not a good economy. So when I tell you to push back, it's not about criticizing the current administration. It's about doing your own homework. You should never follow any leader blindly. As your president, I will always tell you, check what I'm saying for yourself. You won't hear me saying, believe me, believe me, believe me, when I know that there are things you shouldn't believe in what I'm saying. I think this is so crucial to lead a nation that is also informed as individual citizens. We should want you to know the truth. We should want to make sure we're not misinforming you, because misinformation is also deadly. If you're curious about more of my economic policies, you're going to tune in, because at the end of the month, we're having this listening tour, and one of the stops will be on the economy. I'm talking about a new era of affordability. That is what the economy should be based on. Can't be limited to the stock market and the GDP. I was joking earlier that we were all socialists this week. I want you to do your own gut check here. When I say that, is nobody was saying testing shouldn't be free. We were all like, can your girl get a test, right? You hear me with this cough, I promise you, it is not COVID-19, it is allergies. I know that for sure. But I'm sort of glad we have self-containment, because if I was out there right now hacking like this, people would be looking at me sideways, right? I do know a person, a loved one who will remain nameless, who cussed somebody out because they were coughing next to him. I don't want that to be me. But I'll tell you what, when my daughter was running a fever a couple of weeks ago, we could not get our hands on a test. They could only test her for the flu and tell us she did not have that. They could not tell us if she had COVID-19 because there were no tests. And when Houston finally did get tests, the testing was limited to people who had symptoms, or they had to kind of meet a rubric that showed they were worthy of a test in terms of physicality and need. And what we know now, weeks later, we actually knew this before, but what's now coming out in the media is that you can be asymptomatic, meaning you can have no symptoms, no cough, no sniffles, no fever, still be carrying the virus, and also be capable of passing it on. This is why I truly believe that in our new era, which is ahead, we have to commit to pandemic proofing the nation. I'll be releasing a lot of that strategy to you at the end of the month. When you come to one of our listening tour stops on healthcare, you'll hear more about that. I want to talk a little bit more now about the things that I do believe we have to be sure we're watchful for later. Americans have notoriously short memories. Remember how unified we were after 9/11? I'll just let you remember that. Suddenly there were no red states, no blue states. It was just, we were unified. First of all, in our devastation. We were also unified in our outrage. Here's the problem with being unified only in times of crisis. Those times will always pass. So if your unification wasn't real before the crisis, and if it wasn't nurtured during the crisis, it will go away after the crisis. Share this with people who you've been hearing saying the same thing, right? You remember this feels sort of, you keep saying this is unprecedented, but even 9/11, as awful as it was not really unprecedented in the history of the world. Humans have been destroying humans since the beginning of time. The only thing new is how we recover from these eras of destruction. And what I am running for is, because as I am, as optimistic as I am, what I am skeptical about is that the spirit of unification will remain because politics hasn't actually changed. Our leadership hasn't actually changed. So however leadership, whether you're talking about the administration or the opposing party, however they are wired is how they will return to after the crisis. All right? That's not me hypothesizing. That is psychological theory. It's called adaptive behavior. So right now what's happening is we are all adapting to the situation, and we are adapting up. We're elevating up, right? Where we see Joe Biden is not throwing shade at the president for the most part, because this is not the time. The president is not taking his usual gut punches, because this is not the time, and it wouldn't look good for him to do it now. We're all behaving well. We all know that behavior modification does not last. So as you choose your next leader, you want to look for someone whose behavior already shows you the type of actions they would take. Someone who already prioritizes people first. So right now we're in an adaptive season. We're watching people adapt. Luckily, they're adapting up. That's part of the good news. I actually was very impressed by the president's tone today. I know some of you are rolling your eyes on that. I do think that he has personally turned a corner. I think a lot of what I was seeing earlier did not feel genuine. Why do we turn corners? We turn corners when something personally hits home. And he admitted that a friend of his is, I think, in a coma right now from COVID-19. You can't call it a hoax when your own friend is in the hospital. You have to suddenly start believing. When things hit home, that's when we tend to make a change. I believe that we have to be a nation that doesn't wait for things to hit home, for crises to hit, to suddenly behave like a unified nation. I believe our identity is that we're supposed to be one nation under God, indivisible. Those of you who are noticing what I'm talking about, the change in tone, don't you forget what we were praying for on Sunday. Don't you tell me prayer doesn't work. We were praying as a group, as a nation, for a spirit of humility to begin to permeate our culture. We prayed for our president. Hey, wait a minute, you're running against the president. Why are you complimenting him? A true leader is not intimidated when another leader behaves well. Because this is not about comparing and contrasting. This is deciding for yourself what type of leadership do you want to take you into the new era. I can compliment Nancy Pelosi. I can compliment Joe Biden. I can compliment Bernie Sanders. I can compliment the president, because none of what they're doing has an effect on how I will lead. I'm not going to change my messaging to counter what they are doing. My message will stay the same, whether I am the candidate or whether I am the president of the United States. That's something that you can bank on, you can trust. Wouldn't that be great to be able to say that about all of our leaders? That over, they're not going to adapt or return to their natural personality and their natural behavior. I unfortunately do not have faith in that. And I believe that no matter what we see, we need to now prepare for the future, and the future requires a new brand of leadership. I believe that in the future, after this pandemic, there are certain things that we're going to have to make sure are not only relief packages. Affordability is going to have to be real, right? Food insecurity, we're going to have to deal with that for real, not just now during the crisis. So every issue that we're talking about now, everything has changed in politics. We're going to have to address how we handle things now during the pandemic, how we handle things when we return to normal, and how do we prepare in advance for the next epidemic, because there will be one. That's not me prophesying doom. We've seen it since the beginning of time, whether you call it the plagues from the Dark Ages, whether you look at the plagues in the Bible, whether you look at 1918 Spanish flu, Ebola, H1N1, you name it. AIDS is also an epidemic, by the way. I know we've gotten used to it, but it is still a raging epidemic. And so we have to now, decide that we have to begin to pandemic-proof our society. I'll be revealing some of my plans for pandemic proofing. I think we have to engage in perennial preparation. For those of you who love alliteration, that was for you. I think we have to now engage in adapting a new mindset, a new mode of operation that perennially prepares for the inevitable. Now, what does that mean? I think we have to begin to increase access to the three essentials: food, water, and shelter for every citizen, period, point blank, all day long. We don't suddenly become gracious with water because it's an epidemic crisis. Water is a right. I do believe that. So you'll hear me about water affordability when you tune into my economic listening tour stop that's coming up at the end of the month. Tune into OperationRestoration2020.com. Tomorrow we'll have a new calendar out that'll let you bookmark us so that you can join us for all of these virtual information sessions. Remember, it's not your grandma's town hall. I'm not going to be just talking at you. I really actually want to hear from you. And what we're excited about is that a lot of what you tell us will find its way back in the policy that we release. I'll also be talking more about affordable housing. Guess what? It's not just a poor person's problem anymore. Did you know that teachers have an affordable housing crisis? Do you know that in the suburbs they have affordable housing crises? Get this, right now there is not one city in the country, not one, where a single parent can rent a 2-bedroom home on minimum wage. You're saying, well, it's not my problem. I make more than minimum wage. It is your problem. Here's how we must decide to vote into the future. We no longer vote only for what we need and what our families need. That's important. But for the most part, many of us are in a position to provide for us and our families. If not, make sure you are making sure the people that are running are addressing issues that affect you. But also, I dare you to start voting in a way that helps the people in the income bracket below you. I know what it used to be like to be an artist who made an artist's wage. I know what it's like to start as an entrepreneur. I know what it's like to run a small business and have employees who you have to have the difficult talk with, as we did a few days ago, about what will we do if things don't change in the next few weeks. My entire revenue, a lot of the revenue streams that I have are literally based on people gathering in public. So don't let this smile make you think I don't know the pain of this epidemic. It has definitely on our business. I don't honestly feel anxiety about it. I believe that God's in control, and I'm excited to see how he's going to shift this thing, what miraculous turns are going to be made. But I can tell you in the natural that this is something we have to discuss, that my company is being affected. But I know what it's like to be in all these different positions. That means that as excited as I am that there may be a loan I can apply for my business, I am also concerned about the self-employed individual, right? I am also concerned about the homeless person that we have not talked about at all during this epidemic. Are they being tested? Are they sick and dying? Are they spreading the virus? I don't know. Do you? I do know. We'll talk about it during my economic town hall at the end of the month. All right, before I perform, I want to give you something to chew on. That's it. Who said that? Not just about me and my 4 and no more. It cannot be anymore. If you look at that from a human standpoint, it's because we care about people. If you look at it from a self-serving standpoint, if we do not address the issues of the poor and the impoverished, that will always come back to haunt us. You will always suffer from what is being done to and what is happening with the poorest populations. When you saw the plagues of earlier times, rich people thought that they were exempt from it. I don't know about you, but I've noticed that COVID-19 does not discriminate. Anybody notice that? Doesn't care how much money you have. Doesn't care what position you are. If you play professional sports, if you are the leader of a nation, ask Boris Johnson, head of the UK, who has COVID-19, and probably many others in his cabinet because they were not social distancing at first. This illness, this virus, knows no bounds. And I say that because what that means is the people that we have not helped, that we have not taken care of, what we have not done for them will always come back to bite the rest of us as well. So for selfish reasons, if you can't find it in your heart to care about them as humans that also have dignity of life, have purpose, and have destiny, then think about it from a purely economic and public safety standpoint. Here's something to chew on before I perform for you. I give you these segments so that you can see things differently. Part of my specialty is causing us to have a different perspective, to see things as we haven't seen them before, cause us to think a little bit about what we thought we knew or thought we believed. There's a current trend in our country that is not new. It has been around for a long time. And that's when certain issues affect only one demographic or one area, one level of socioeconomic status, we tend to ignore it. Or when we talk about it without compassion or from a criminal standpoint. So you think at issues like welfare. We've demonized that issue. We say people who need that are poor and lazy. I'm even seeing that now as people talk about collecting checks. We tell you what, it's not only poor people collecting checks. My family does not qualify for the checks, but I know people who you wouldn't believe will need those checks. You can't tell by the way they look or the way they talk, but they will need those checks. I also know that big businesses are cashing some pretty big checks being given to them. So when we talk about welfare, when it was something we thought only affected poor people or minorities, we always demonized it or criminalized it. When it now affects people who are either what we call the majority or people who have means, suddenly we pay attention and we talk about it with compassion. Suddenly businesses need our help. All right. You will not hear me demonize business. I am a businesswoman. I plan to be a billionaire one day, and that does not mean that suddenly I will be evil or a crook. The same heart that I had as a starving artist, which I always hated that phrase, which is why I'm no longer a starving artist, will be the same heart that I have as a billionaire. Here's what you want. You want that when people begin to reach certain levels, they still care about the people who are at the levels from which they came. So the trend in our country is that until the middle class, until suburbia, until wealthy people are affected, we first talk about these issues from a negative or criminal standpoint. Think about even the marijuana issue, right? You have people in jail for minor marijuana charges, yet suddenly marijuana is legal. And we're finding that states and cities are profiting pretty seriously. So you're probably going to watch the spread of the legalization of marijuana because it has proven profitable. But before that, it was a criminalized issue. You think about how we talk so compassionately about the opioid epidemic. Suddenly, we really care about people with addiction. We want to get them help. We talk about it from a health standpoint. When we had the war on drugs, we talked about cocaine and crack only purely from a criminal standpoint. How do you put those people in jail? How do you get those drugs off the street? And that was when the issue affected seemingly minorities, African Americans in particular. But now that the opioid crisis has crossed economic boundaries, we talk about it with compassion. I said last night we did the same thing with AIDS when we thought that AIDS was something that only happened to Africans or only happened to gay people. We didn't talk about it with compassion. When we saw a young white middle school boy contract AIDS because of healthcare situation, being in the hospital and having a transfusion, we suddenly were able to talk about it with compassion. I would love to see a new era where we now look at all issues from a people perspective first, whether it's addiction, whether it's welfare. That's going to completely change the way that we address issues. I think we can go from a people first, prioritizing people premise that's going to change the level of progress and the speed with which we have progress. What if we just cut out the whole demonization piece altogether? Something I want you to think about. If you don't believe me, check back, look at our history with the issues that I just mentioned, and you'll see the pattern and the trend that I talked about play out over and over again. Okay, you're going to share this again if you've got music lovers, particularly Beethoven lovers. I made my early career solely as a classical concert pianist. I'm here in Houston, Texas, because I went to grad school at Rice University, which has an incredible music program called the Shepherd School of Music. Did my undergrad at Northwestern University, where I also majored in piano performance. If you want to know the story about how a pianist ends up running for the presidency, you'll learn more about that over the next few days. You'll go to operationrestoration2020.com or simply text RESTORE to 33777. You'll learn more about not only the movement that is Operation Restoration, you'll learn more about my qualifications, my platforms. You'll also learn how to get involved. We'd love for you to become one of our incredible purpose-based dynamic volunteers. We have a volunteer kickoff meeting April 6th. Last announcement at the end of the month. Stay tuned because we're bringing you a 3-stop listening tour where I'll cover in more detail my concepts, policies, platforms on education, on the economy, as well as healthcare. Most importantly, I want to hear from you. I want to hear what you care about. I'm going to end now, move my camera a bit, to perform for you, give you a piece by Beethoven. You all know the Moonlight Sonata. You say, why play the Moonlight Sonata? It's so sad. Actually, as a little girl, I only wanted to play things that were fast and furious. I wanted to be out, busy all the time. I never valued rest. I never valued slowing down. I never valued even the beauty in darkness. And I think in these so-called dark times, isn't it incredible that even in this darkness, we're still finding beauty? I think this is one of those pieces by one of my favorite composers, Beethoven. I'll play it for you tonight. Let it also serve as a tribute for the people that we have lost over the last few weeks and months. I offer my own repentance. I ask forgiveness for anything that we as individuals have done that have not helped this situation. I think if we're not careful, if we don't start to follow the guidelines and do the hard things, that we are unwillingly sacrificing people just because they're strangers, just because it's less numbers than the flu. Please don't ever be anyone who says that. Who cares? One life lost unnecessarily is too much. So I want you to hear this Beethoven as a tribute for them, and also a reminder that there is still beauty in both darkness and in the power of slowing down. Thank you guys for joining me. Share this with anybody who needs something beautiful in these hard times. Okay?